we don't give speeches at TMI Project, we tell stories, so I'm going to tell you one of mine. In 2007, I was just 2 years sober and working at a shared office as an advertising salesperson for a local arts magazine. It was actually right across the street. I was good at my job, but I longed for more meaningful work, my life's work. I could hear it calling in the distance, I just didn't know how to reach it. One day I was sitting at my desk, probably scouring through competing magazines, looking for leads or trying to close contracts to meet my monthly goal, when an email came into my inbox. A new initiative from United Way was putting on a production of The Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler to raise funds, and they were in need of a director. I had run a women's theater company in New York City for over a decade. When my alcoholism inspired what would end up being my last geographic move back to my hometown of New Paltz, the thing I found most daunting was a future without a creative community. No outlet for the thing I loved most. That place that felt more like home than any dwelling I had ever resided in. The sweet spot where theater meets activism. I didn't know what I was in store for, but I could feel with the arrival of that email that my path was turning in a new direction. It was a powerful sensation of simultaneously being pushed and pulled. I emailed United Way back immediately and soon after met with the board and landed the director's position. Just as quickly, I was met with that terrible beast, fraud syndrome. Why did I think I could do this? Why did I talk so confidently at that fucking interview? A famous actress just volunteered to take the stage with us, which only deepened my uncertainties, but I kept my newly sober feet moving forward. I held auditions, and it was there that I met Julie Novak. I cast her in the part of the woman who liked to make vaginas happy. She was really good in that role. So good, in fact, that I married her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I do have to say, though, just as a side note, that I was able to meet Eve a couple of weeks ago, and we told her that story. And she told us that we are the third actor-director couple who have married as a result of that monologue. I want to know how many others are out there. Well, we raised quite a bit of money in 2008 and again in 2009. So in 2010, United Way asked me if I would direct the Vagina Monologues again. I had now known this cast for 2 years. And when you get to know a group over the Vagina Monologues instead of coffee or drinks, you get acquainted very quickly. I knew they had stories of their own, deep stories that craved being born, stories that had sat stagnant for too long, stories that were preventing these women from taking up their right-sized space in the world. We gathered in a circle on my living room floor and crafted our own monologues, our own true stories that were scary to tell, but once we began to spin our tales, they took on lives of their own. Each story had its own push and pull. There was no stopping at that point. The life force was too great. Our stories were ready to be born. Before our first production, we were faced with a challenge. What would we call ourselves? We were no longer talking about our coochie snorchers, or our punannies, our powder boxes or our monkey boxes, our twats, cunts, or our Gladys Siegelmans. I've always wanted to know who that woman is. So what would we call this new collection of monologues? After much deliberation, we landed on TMI. We were sharing the parts that we usually leave out because we're too ashamed or embarrassed, the parts that are precious to our individuality, and also connect us to the rest of humanity. On February 19th, 2010, the Vagina Monologues gave birth to TMI Project, and I could not be more grateful. This work has certainly changed my life, but it has also impacted the lives of the over 1,000 people who've taken our workshops and more than 10,000 people who've listened to our stories. We've gone from my living room to the United Nations and many places in between. We've worked with activists from many countries around the world, established ourselves in the local mental health field, and fallen in love with the teens that we serve in what they call their Angst Anonymous meetings. With Eve's work under our wings, we've opened hearts, changed minds, and brought people to action. And this, my friends, is what Eve Ensler inspires when she's not looking. In addition to being the award-winning author of the Vagina Monologues, which has been translated into over 48 languages, performed in over 140 countries, and used to raise over $100 million for highly effective anti-violence programs around the world. In addition to spearheading 1 Billion Rising, the largest mass action in history to end violence against women, Eve has written numerous award-winning plays and memoirs, the most recent of which is In the Body of the World. I recently read it in one sitting. It is the most graphic and honest story I've ever read about cancer, the most tender, open-hearted account of facing what could be the end of one's life. And perhaps most importantly, it's also a beautifully woven tapestry of the connections that people make with themselves, with each other, and with the world around them. What became so clear to me upon reading this epic story is Eve's unwavering courage, her dedicated passion to ending violence against women, not just her willingness, but her eagerness to dive right into the eye of the storm, ask questions, create a space for dialogue around solutions, and then go after resources and support like a fierce protective mama. She did this for herself as she faced cancer, and she did this for the women she met in the Congo. When Eve first traveled to the Congo in 2007 to meet with and learn from women survivors of violence, she was most interested in knowing what solutions they felt would work in the face of such horrible atrocities. Eve learned that what these women wanted most was a place to live together in community so that they could heal. They envisioned a sanctuary called City of Joy, where they could be safe, heal from trauma, live with joy, proclaim their power, and gain skills to be leaders in their communities. Eve, along with her team at V-Day, was committed to finding the resources to help them build it. In her book, she says, "The process of building was arduous and seemingly impossible, delayed by rain and lack of roads and electricity, corrupt building managers, poor oversight by UNICEF, and rising prices. We were scheduled to open in May, but on March 17th, 2010, they discovered a huge tumor in my uterus. Cancer threw me in the window of my disassociation into the center of my body's crisis. The Congo threw me deep into the crisis of the world. And these two experiences merged as I faced the disease and what I felt like was the beginning of the end." The details of both situations are grueling, and yet with love, support, persistence, bravery, and a commitment to living and healing, a commitment to the body and to the world, Eve recovered and the City of Joy was born. I urge you to read the full story, but I'm astounded to report that in the past 5 years, 759 women have graduated from the City of Joy. It is my honor to present the first Voices in Action Award to Eve Ensler. I present this award as an artist who is floored by this full circle moment in my own life. As the leader of TMI Project, whose work would not exist without your brave work, as a fellow woman and human on this planet, in gratitude for the miraculous progress that has been made because of your unstoppable drive and passion for safety and freedom for all. This is for you and for all of the girls and women, boys and men who hear the whisper of their own fraud syndrome and instead of staying silent, take it as a cue to bravely turn their voice into action. Thank you for persistently listening, relentlessly writing, and changing our world one story at a time.
I think I'll be okay with that. Yeah, I think so.
Because that's what we're doing. We're giving her an award. And we're going to listen to her wonderful words. And I hope that when you are done and we take one last bow as a group, you will all join us in the back room. Thank you.
I'm supposed to talk now? Thank you. I just want to say I know all of us feel this way. The stories we've heard tonight are just so profound, so beautiful, so true, so real, so brave. And I'm really overwhelmed. And I just bow to you. I bow. Really. Thank you. Thank you. I was thinking when I was listening to the stories tonight, we have all the answers we need right here. We don't need anyone up above telling us what to do, who we are. We just need to hear each other. Everything is amongst us. Everything is amongst us. I just want to say to Eva that I don't ever think I need anyone to ever say anything again to me in my life. No, I'm done. I'm check, done. That was the most beautiful introduction. Sometimes people introduce you and it's like people who do obituaries for people they've never met, and I feel like, I guess they're talking about me. But that was so thought, so felt, so considered, so deep. And I love you, and thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want to honor Jennifer Buffett, who's here tonight, because it's really how I became connected with TMI, and she is the source of so much goodness and so much amazing, positive light energy on this planet. And I thank you. And I also want to say that I bought my brother James Lacine, not my blood brother, but more importantly, my spiritual, artistic soul brother here tonight, who's one of great artists in New York and one of amazing storytellers who started the Trevor Project, which is the amazing project, to stop teenage suicide. Let me begin by just saying a huge thank you. I want to say to Eva and Sari and Julie, your whole team, you are extraordinary women doing some truly powerful, soul-opening work on this planet. I honor your methodology, your carefulness, the depth of your listening, and the size of your hearts. Your work is the work that has the ability to shift this very fractured planet. We live in a world of disconnection, disassociation, isolation, where the core truths that this country are founded on, genocide of the native people, slavery and the destruction and subsequent destruction of African Americans, denigration of women in a biblical story propagated on the notion that the earth is not only separate from us, but something we must tame and have dominion over. Many of us come from families where trauma, lies, denial were at the center of what created us. We have lived behind veils, walls of untruth. Telling stories is how we come into the present, into our bodies, into our energy, into the possibility of healing, creativity, and transformation. Telling stories creates community and removes shame as it reminds people they are not alone. There wasn't one story tonight that I didn't identify with. There wasn't one person who spoke that I didn't feel some aspect of their story at some point in that story. If people are able to tell the truth, they are freed from their darkness, their wounds, their crimes. They are able to free themselves and their victims. We need spaces. We need rituals. We need processes. We need excellent leaders and facilitators, and we need time. I don't know about all of you, but the world is just moving so fast, so fast, so fast, so fast. Where are we going? What is all this rapid growth, rapid internet, rapid? We need to stop and listen. If I were going to call for one central remedy to so much of what is destroying us right now, hateful sexism, murderous racism, obscene inequality of wealth, gun violence, disrespect of our children, and mad destruction of our Mother Earth, I would say what we need to do is get to the root of why it is happening. Sadly, our knee-jerk and hysterical response in this country is to escalate police violence, build walls, buy more guns, industrialize punishment, make more bombs, escalate more wars, demonize more groups, more people, and to carry on as bad business as usual. The real work, the painstaking transformational work involved something much deeper and much more dangerous. We need to tell our stories, and we need to listen to each other. We need to release our shame and our embarrassment and own our rage and our ignorance and our grief and fear. We need space to hear each other like we have tonight, and we need spaces to speak the truth without judgment or criticism. After all these years, I assume that every single person I sit down next to has been traumatized. Some directly, everyone indirectly. It is impossible to be alive in the year 2016 and not be traumatized. I assume that every person has an aching secret that has metastasized and spread to take over her or his life. I assume that every person is longing to be freed from that secret, to be listened to be held, to be a member of the human family, and that just about all of us feel we are not good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, white enough, thin enough, rich enough, or enough, period. That we are not worthy of being listened to, that everything that has happened is mostly our fault, and I assume we have no idea what is really going on in the people around us. If you'll bear with me, I'd like to share a story. For 8 years, I worked at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, and I wouldn't call it work, I would call it privilege. I ran a group for women who were inside, who were there for violent crimes. I ran it for 8 years. I went up every few weeks, and we gathered for hours at a time. And each week, the women would tell their stories and work on their crimes and go deep into themselves to really purge and excavate what had gone. It was one of the most mystical, profound experiences of my life. But at the beginning of these groups, we used to meet and we would do this exercise where we would go around each week, and each week we'd go, this week we're going to talk about what happened to us from when we were 1 to 5, and everyone would tell a story. So I fell in love immediately with everybody in the group. Everybody but one woman. I knew that she was a child abuser, and I had been abused by my own father and incested by my own father and beaten by my own father. And she was not particularly attractive, and I did not like her. And I had all kinds of stories about her and projections about her, and she gave me the creeps. But everybody else I loved. Everybody else I had passion for and connection to. And one day, the third meeting, she sat down next to me. And I was like, oh my God, this woman is next to me. Ew. And the tape started to go, I don't want her next to me, make her go away, make her go away. So we went around the group and we got to her, and she told her story. And she told a story of how, when she was a little girl, she had been raped by her stepfather and mother, who then sold her out as essentially a dildo to the neighborhood, where they chained her to beds. They raped her every day. They used her as a sex toy. They violated her and violated her until her mother died, and she was left alone with her stepfather, who then married her and made her into a sex surrogate who would go out and get other children that he could rape and he could abuse. And during the course of that, a child died, and she came to prison. And she said to me, please never let me out of prison. I'm a destroyed person. And I sat in the group and I started to weep. I wept because I had made up a story about who that woman was. I had judged her, I had erased her because of my own history, because of my own story. I had made her into other. I had made her into nothing. And I vowed to myself that day, I would never do that again. That I would work the best of my ability to sit and believe that every person in the room had a story to tell that had brought them to where they are. And to hear that story and to listen deeply for that story. The internet has in many ways supplanted real connection and communication and multi-layered understanding. I think it is why it is rife with so much cruelty and snark and hate. People aren't real to each other, and their vulnerability and their pain is not real. We need to see each other in the flesh. We need to see each other's faces and feel each other's sweat and witness each other's sorrow and joy and tears and laughters. Stories bring us into relationship. And I firmly believe that nothing changes. You can change laws, you can legislate behavior, but nothing changes without relationship, without the engagement of the heart and without listening. I've been running groups now for listening to people tell their stories for probably 40 years. I've worked with homeless women in New York for 8 years, to Bosnian rape survivors in refugee camps, to working with the amazing group at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. And I want to say about that group, their crimes that they entered and confronted and dealt with and ripped open their hearts and souls. I got to witness that and be privileged to that. I saw then how critical it is to build and create sacred spaces where people are able to plummet their souls, excavate their wounds and guilt, and to do this in the presence of each other. I saw how this process liberated women and allowed them to see their lives in a much larger context, how the writing expurgated their most buried and often controlling emotions, and how the ritual of the group writing organically inspired women to be transformed in owning their crimes. It made me see actually how senseless, obsolete, and barbaric prisons are, and how what we need are instead are places of transformation and care, where those that have inflicted harm can investigate the reasons they have been driven to do those things, and by doing so, change their behavior, change their trajectories, and make true amends to their victims and repair their own hugely damaged souls. I worked for a year in New Orleans with a diverse and extraordinary group of women after Katrina. Actors, Mardi Gras queens, writers, social workers, and they purged their pain, their sense of abandonment, gratitude for those who shut up, and created a stunning piece called Swimming Upstream, which we got to tour around the country, educating people about the real story that happened in New Orleans, the racist story, the classist story, and of the flood, allowing people everywhere then to tell their stories. I interviewed women for The Good Body and learned so much about how we as women have been trained to hate our bodies and obsess about our bodies, and how we spend so much of our time fixing ourselves when nothing was ever broken, when we could be spending our time fixing the world. But it was really the experience of the vagina monologues where I learned the power of listening and the power of sharing stories. And I have to say, doing those initial 200 interviews, which I then turned into a fictional piece, were some of the most profound days of my life, where women after women after women had to tell me their story, had to talk about their vagina, and the story of your vagina is indeed the story of your life. As proud as I am of that, what's happened with that play and the extraordinary reach and where it's gone, what I'm equally proud of is how many monologue plays have started to happen and have happened around the world. I lost count at about 70, but there are the Yoni monologues, and the African monologues, and the trans monologues, and the Yoni Bat monologues, and the Palestinian monologues, and the menopause monologues, and the breast monologues, and the DACA monologues, and the marijuana. And to me, that has been one of the greatest things, that everybody felt encouraged to then tell their stories. Just like Eva felt compelled to rise up and create this amazing, amazing thing called TMI. When we tell our stories, particularly when they are witnessed and heard, we exist. And so much of us don't feel like we exist. So much of us feel we don't matter in this neoliberal capitalist system that actually turns us into resources and commodities, and either you have value or you don't have value in terms of this neoliberal trajectory, rather than being souls and people who hurt and yearn and long and have desires. We are real, and what happened to us did in fact happen to us, and the act of telling is the first step of liberation and the moment of being born. So, I want to close by saying, support this glorious and critical work of TMI. Support it with your pocketbooks, support it with your love, support it with backing up their incredible women, with support, with reminding them of how amazing what they're doing is, and support all these readers who are bearing their souls. Support more and more spaces and rituals and experiences and opportunities where you can be heard and where you can listen to folks who may not appear to be like you. I think one of the biggest problems we have around so many issues, but particularly thinking about where we are in terms of the climate of race and racism in this country, is we don't know each other. We don't reach across borders, we don't reach across neighborhoods, we don't reach across communities to hear each other and know who each other is. Part of the process of building the new world involves listening, deep listening as well as sharing. It may mean things and hearing things about race and racism from people of color that rip you apart as a white person, or hearing things that men have done to women that make you intensely ashamed of being a man. Our work is to sit with these feelings, not flee in guilt or anger or punishment, but by sitting and listening, we honor the person telling. The listening is a healing, is a witnessing. My experience is that people do not want advice or directions or prescriptions. They don't want to be interrupted. They don't want to be corrected. They don't want to be saved. They don't want your guilt or your pity. What they want is to be seen. What they want is to be held. What they want is to be heard. And I really believe these last three things are the critical ingredients of love. I thank you so much for this award. I'm touched to my heart.